The mansion was unusually quiet that evening, even though rich and powerful guests had filled the wide and shiny hall from corner to corner, their expensive clothes and soft voices mixing with the gentle sound of classical music floating in the air. And in the center of it all stood Mr. Armand, one of the most famous billionaires in the city, known for his sharp mind, cold heart, and powerful business sense. And tonight was important because he was about to sign a huge deal that would make him even more powerful than he already was. And everyone was waiting for him to pick up the golden pen kept on the glass table in front of him. The lawyer was ready, the cameras were ready, the business partners were ready, and even the waiters had stopped moving, holding their trays in still hands, because everyone knew this was a big moment. But just as Mr. Armand moved his hands slightly toward the paper, a soft sound of footsteps broke the silence. Slow but firm, tap tap on the marble floor, and all heads slowly turned toward the source of the sound, where a young girl in a simple maid's uniform was walking forward with calm steps, her hands held tightly at her sides, her eyes focused only on the billionaire. And some people recognized her as the daughter of the new housemaid, a girl who should not have been in this hall. Not at this time, not in front of such important people. Whispers started moving across the room like a small wave. People wondering who she was and why she was walking to the center without fear. The head maid tried to stop her, but she was too late. The girl had already reached the table, standing only a few feet away from Armand, who was now looking at her with a confused and slightly annoyed expression. But that expression changed when their eyes met. Something in his face softened, then tightened, then turned pale as if he had seen a ghost from his past. The girl lifted her head a little and spoke in a calm but strong voice that was clear enough for everyone to hear. "Sir, I know you from the orphanage." Those simple words fell into the room like a stone into still water, and suddenly everything froze. The music stopped, the whispers stopped. The pen slipped from Mr. Armand's fingers and hit the glass table with a sharp sound. His hand started to shake without him even noticing, and his eyes stayed locked on the face of the girl, as if trying to remember something buried deep inside his mind. The guests looked at each other in shock, some in confusion, some in curiosity, some in quiet fear, because they all knew Mr. Armand was a man with no known past. No family, no childhood stories, nothing. He had always said he built himself from nothing, and that was the end of it. But now this girl had opened a door that had been tightly locked for many years. The head maid quickly ran forward with a worried face, her hands shaking, trying to pull the girl back, whispering that she had made a big mistake. But the girl gently pushed her hand away and kept her eyes on Mr. Armand. Then she spoke again, her voice a little softer but still steady. "You saved me once, but you left me there." A quiet gasp moved through the crowd, some covering their mouths in shock, others leaning forward in interest. The words seemed to hit Mr. Armand like a heavy wave, his memories starting to blur and twist in his mind. Flashes of broken walls, crying children, a small hand holding his, a promise whispered in darkness, and then silence. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. His throat dry, his heart racing, and he felt a strange pain in his chest that he had never felt before. The girl then slowly reached into her small cloth bag and carefully pulled out an old half-burned photo. The edges were black and curled, the surface cracked and faded, but it was still clear enough to see two children standing in front of a broken orphanage gate. One was a little boy with messy hair and serious eyes, and the other was a little girl holding his sleeve tightly. But the girl's face in the photo was torn, ripped away long ago, as if someone had not wanted that part of the picture to exist, and Mr. Armand's breath stopped. Because the boy in the photo was him, he knew it even without thinking. The same eyes, the same shape of his face, the same silent sadness. It was a past he had tried to forget, a past someone had forced him to forget, And now it was standing in front of him in the form of a young girl and an old broken photo. The lawyer stepped back slowly. The business partners exchanged worried looks, and the room was filled with heavy tension, like the air itself had grown thick and hard to breathe. The girl lifted the photo a little higher so he could see it clearly and said, almost in a whisper now, "You promised you would come back for me." And for a moment the world outside the hall did not exist for Mr. Armand. Only the memory of a dark night, a fence made of rusted iron, a hand slipping from his own as he was pulled away, a voice crying his name, and a promise made by a scared little boy who had no idea what the world was about to do to him. His heart started to beat harder and his eyes grew slightly wet, something that had never happened in front of anyone. And the room watched in complete silence as the powerful billionaire stood frozen in time, facing a past he never thought would return. And yet it had returned now, not with fire or noise, but with a simple sentence spoken by a girl who refused to be forgotten. And as the photo rested between them like a bridge connecting two broken timelines, one question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Who was the other child whose face was torn from the picture? And why had fate brought them together again after so many silent years? The hall was still frozen in silence after Ayla's words, and no one dared to move because Mr. Armand had not spoken yet. His eyes were still fixed on the old half-burned photo, as if it had the power to pull him back in time. And slowly he lifted his trembling hand and touched the corner of the picture, feeling the rough burned edge under his fingertips. The guests held their breath, waiting to see what he would do. And finally he looked up at Ayla's face, searching for answers inside her eyes. And with a voice that was low and almost broken, he asked her where she had found the picture. And Ayla answered that she had kept it with her since she was small. That she did not remember who gave it to her, but she remembered hiding it under a loose floorboard in the orphanage because it was the only proof that her memory was real. And when the orphanage burned down, she had run back through the smoke and flames just to take it before everything turned to ashes. And when she said this, the room was filled with quiet shock, because it was clear she had risked her life for a memory. Mr. Armand closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, they were filled with deep pain, as if a locked door in his mind had started to open. And he whispered that the last thing he remembered from that place was fire and screams and someone pulling him away, telling him he was chosen for a better life, a richer life, and that he should forget everything behind him. He said he was taken into a black car and driven far away, and that was the last time he saw the orphanage or the people in it, people who had once been his only family. And hearing this, Ayla felt a strange mix of sadness and anger, because she now understood that he had not left her by choice. He had been taken, but still he had promised to come back. And promises made in darkness often stayed in the heart for a very long time. Mr. Armand then asked her how she had recognized him after all these years, and she told him that even though his clothes had changed, his hair had changed, and his whole life had changed, his eyes had stayed the same. And she had seen them in a newspaper once when he became the youngest billionaire, and something in her heart had moved. Something that told her he was the boy who had once shared half his bread with her and had wiped her tears on cold nights. And from that day on she had searched for a way to come close to him, not for money or fame, but for answers. So she had convinced her mother to take the job as a maid in his mansion. She had begged and prayed every night for a chance to stand in front of him and say those simple words. And now that chance had finally come. The guests slowly began to leave the hall as Mr. Armand raised his hand, signaling that the meeting was over. He asked the staff to clear the room, and one by one they walked out with confused faces, whispering to each other about what they had just seen and heard, until only Mr. Armand and Ayla were left standing there under the soft light of the large chandelier. The silence between them was heavy, but not angry. It was filled with memories that had never been spoken. He looked at her again and said he had tried many times to remember his childhood, but his mind had always been blocked, as if someone had erased the pages of his past. And every time he tried to think of that place, he felt strong pain in his head. So he had stopped trying. He had buried his past under success and money and power. But now it had returned in the form of a brave girl with honest eyes. And he asked her what she remembered about him. And she told him that he used to be called Aeon. Not Armand, that he was kind even when he had nothing. That he used to protect the smaller children, and that even when he was hungry, he would give the last piece of bread to those who cried. And as she spoke, pieces of memory started to return to him like broken glass coming back together. He remembered sitting near a broken window, looking up at the moon through cracked bars. He remembered holding a small girl's hand and telling her that one day the world outside would see their value. And then he remembered the man who used to walk through the orphanage with a cold smile. The owner, a man named Mr. Kareem, who used to choose children like items, who used to take some away and never bring them back. And fear slowly filled his chest as he whispered that name, realizing for the first time that the same man was now one of his business partners, a respected and powerful man in the city, but in truth, a shadow from a dark past. And Ayla felt her heart beat faster because she knew that name too. She knew he was the man who had locked children in basements and had sold them like objects. And now that man was close to Mr. Armand again, closer than ever. And as a cold wind passed through the large windows, as if the past itself had taken a breath, one dangerous thought became clear in both their minds. Mr. Kareem did not just take children, he kept secrets. And he would not let those secrets come into the light without a fight. And as Armand looked once more at the old photo, and then at the brave girl standing in front of him, he realized that this was not just a memory returning. This was the beginning of a truth that could change everything. And somewhere in the mansion, a shadow moved quietly, as if someone had already started watching them. The air inside the mansion felt heavier after the name Mr. Kareem was spoken, as if the very walls had heard it before and understood the danger that came with it. And for a few silent seconds, neither Mr. Armand nor Ayla spoke, both of them lost in memories and fear that had been hidden for many years. Until suddenly a soft sob broke the stillness, and Ayla turned her head to see her mother standing near the doorway. Her eyes filled with tears that refused to stop. She had heard the name too, and it had opened the wound in her heart that she had tried to close a long time ago. Slowly she stepped forward and fell to her knees on the cold marble floor and begged Mr. Armand to listen carefully to what she was about to say, her voice shaking as she explained that many years ago she had worked at the same orphanage as a cleaner and a helper, that she had seen the dark truth behind those dirty walls. She had seen children being chosen and taken away late at night. She had seen Mr. Kareem hand over small boys and girls to rich men and women who wanted them for reasons that were never good. And she had seen the fear in the children's eyes as they were pulled away with no chance to say goodbye. She said one night the police had received a tip and were about to come to the orphanage. And Mr. Kareem, in panic, had tried to remove as many children as possible before they arrived. And that was the night Armand had been taken away, and Ayla had been hidden in the basement by her own mother, who had locked her behind heavy boxes just to save her from being seen. And while the fire started upstairs and the building slowly burned above her, the mother had been knocked down and trapped, unable to reach her daughter. And only by a miracle had Ayla found her way out through a broken wall the next morning, coughing and covered in ash but alive. And when Mr. Armand heard this, his whole body went weak because he finally understood the truth. He had not been the lucky one who was saved. He had been sold, chosen like an object, placed into the hands of a rich family who had changed his name, erased his past, and trained him to become someone else. Someone polished and perfect for the world, but they had never given him love. and that emptiness inside him had been growing ever since. And when he looked at Ayla, now he saw a part of the life that had been stolen from him, a part of a story that had never been allowed to finish. Ayla's mother then lifted her head and said something even more shocking. She said that a few weeks ago, she had seen Mr. Kareem standing in the private garden of the mansion, talking to Mr. Armand like an old friend, laughing and enjoying tea as if they shared nothing but good memories. And when she saw that scene, her blood had turned cold because she knew that a snake was sitting beside a man who did not remember being bitten. And hearing this, Mr. Armand felt anger rising inside him like fire for the first time in his life. The calm, successful mask he always wore started to crack. He began to remember pieces from the past. A tall man with cold eyes, a strong hand on his shoulder, a painful warning to stay quiet, and a voice telling him he had been chosen for a better life. And all this time he had believed it without question. He had even thanked fate for taking him away from a broken orphanage, never knowing he had been taken from the only place where he truly belonged. Ayla watched his face and knew his mind was fighting between the present and the past, between lies and truth. And she stepped closer to him without fear and said that he could not stay silent anymore, because Mr. Kareem was not just a man from the past. He was still dangerous in the present, still powerful, still hiding behind respect and money. And if he found out that Mr. Armand was remembering, that the truth was returning, he would do anything to stop it, including hurting her, her mother, or anyone who stood in his way. And just as if the world wanted to prove her words, a soft sound came from the hallway outside the door. The sound of slow footsteps stopping suddenly, and a shadow passing beneath the thin gap under the door. Someone was standing there, listening. And when the shadow moved away, Ayla and her mother froze in fear. But Mr. Armand straightened his back, his eyes turning sharp instead of confused. And in that moment, he was no longer a lost boy from an orphanage. He was a powerful man who finally understood he had an enemy, and deep inside him, a new fire was born. Not one made of anger alone, but of truth and justice. And he quietly promised that he would not let the past destroy the future again, even if that meant bringing down the very man who had helped shape his false life. And as they stood together in that silent, heavy room, all three of them knew that a hidden war had just begun. A war not of business or money, but of memories, secrets, and a long-buried truth that was now ready to fight its way into the light. Night had settled over the mansion, but inside Ayla's mind there was no rest at all. The words of her mother, the name of Mr. Kareem, and the strange shadow outside the door kept turning again and again in her thoughts. And while the rest of the house slept, she quietly slipped out of her small room with slow, careful steps, her heart beating fast as she moved down the long hallway under the soft yellow lights, because something inside her was telling her that the truth was hiding in this house, not far from her, and if she waited too long, it might disappear forever. She remembered seeing Mr. Kareem walking toward the old guest wing many times, a side of the mansion that was almost never used by anyone. And so she followed that memory like a faint line in the dark, moving through silent corridors until she reached an old wooden door at the end. It was slightly open, as if waiting for her. And when she pushed it a little wider, she saw a narrow staircase going down into darkness. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping onto the first step, holding the wall for support, and slowly walking down into a hidden basement that smelled of old dust and forgotten time, her fingers brushing against the cold stone until she found a small switch. And when the weak light turned on, revealed a room she had never seen before. A room filled with old metal cabinets, broken chairs, and shelves stacked with brown files that looked as if they had not been touched for years. Her breath caught because she felt she had entered a place that held secrets meant never to be found. And as she walked further inside, she noticed one cabinet slightly open, as if someone had recently searched it, She gently pulled it open and saw inside dozens of files, each one labeled with names and numbers. And as her eyes moved across them, her body started to tremble because the names written, they were the names of children. Small children, taken from different places, different years, different orphanages, and with shaking hands, she pulled out one file and opened it, seeing a small photo of a little girl with messy hair and tired eyes. And beneath it was written one word that made her heart stop. Ayla. And beside it was a number, a price, and a date. And hot tears filled her eyes as she understood that even she had not been safe. Even she had been chosen and listed like an object to be sold. And just as her world started spinning, she saw another file with a familiar name typed across the top. Ayan, and she knew this was Mr. Armand's real name. The name from the orphanage, the name that had been erased. And inside that file was a photo of a small boy, hurt but strong, and beside it were notes that said he was intelligent, quick, valuable, and perfect for a wealthy family. And in that moment, a painful truth crashed into her heart. Mr. Armand had not just been taken. He had been selected, prepared, and delivered to the life he now lived. And the people who did it were still connected to him, still walking freely in his world. She started flipping through more pages and saw the same name written again and again. Mr. Karim, marked as the main handler, the man in charge. And as she tried to breathe through her fear, a quiet sound behind her made her freeze. The slow sound of a door creaking open upstairs, and faint footsteps starting to come down the stairs. Someone else was coming into the basement. Her heart beat so loud she was sure it could be heard. She quickly pushed the files back in place. But she could not leave the one with her name or the one with Mr. Armand's name behind. And so she hid them inside her uniform, her hands shaking. Her body pressed against the cold wall, and as the steps grew closer, a tall shadow appeared at the bottom of the stairs, a shadow she knew too well. And in a low voice filled with danger, Mr. Karim said her name slowly, as if tasting it on his tongue. "You are walking in places that do not belong to you." And Ayla lifted her head, fear and courage mixing inside her. Because now the truth was no longer hidden, the mask had fallen. And the enemy was standing right in front of her, smiling. And in that moment she understood that her life, Mr. Armand's life, and the truth of the past were all in serious danger. And somewhere above them, inside the silent mansion, the man who was once called Aeon slept unaware that the biggest secret of his life had just been opened, and that the very person who destroyed his past had just discovered the one girl who remembered it. All that silence filled the office. Mr. Hale's usually calm eyes flicked to the door, then back to Lily. For a moment, he looked scared. "That name," he said quietly. "You should not be saying that name." "But it's true," Lily insisted, her hands shaking now. "I heard the lady at the orphanage say it. She said you used to visit a little girl, a very long time ago. A girl who looked like me." The assistant stepped back, confused. "Sir, what is going on?" Mr. Hale didn't answer. He walked slowly to a painting hung on the far wall, a peaceful image of a field under a morning sky. He pressed a hidden switch under the frame. With a soft click, a narrow door appeared in the wall and slid open. Behind it was a small room, untouched by time. Inside were old toys, children's drawings, tiny shoes, and a faded pink blanket neatly placed on a bed that hadn't been slept in for years. Lily's heart pounded. This was her room. Mr. Hale whispered, "The girl from the orphanage. Her name was Rose." He turned toward Lily, his voice trembling with emotion. "She was my daughter." The entire world seemed to stop. "I thought she died," he continued. "The system told me she never survived the illness. I searched for years. Then I gave up." Lily felt the room spin. "But she didn't die," she murmured. "They changed her name. They changed everything. Mr. Hawley slowly knelt in front of her, eyes full of tears. Then that means, he said gently, I never stopped being your father, even if I didn't know it. Lily swallowed, unsure how to respond. Her whole life had been built on questions with no answers. And now, the answer stood right in front of her. But before she could speak, a loud knock echoed through the hallway outside. The assistant rushed to the door. Sir, he called, there is a woman here asking for you. She says you must not talk to the girl, and that the past is supposed to stay buried. Mr. Hale's expression darkened. After all these years, he muttered, she has finally come. Would you like me to continue with part 6, the mysterious woman confrontation plus shocking twist? And as requested earlier, here's an image description for ideogram you can use. Image prompt, a dramatic, cinematic scene inside a luxurious billionaire's office. A young girl from an orphanage with simple clothes stands near a tall, shocked businessman in a dark suit. Behind them, a hidden door in the wall is open, revealing a small abandoned child's room with old toys, drawings, and a faded pink blanket. Soft golden light falls into the secret room, creating an emotional and mysterious atmosphere. Highly detailed, realistic 4K cinematic lighting. The knock at the door echoed again. Stronger this time. Lily's heart jumped. Mr. Hall froze for a split second, then straightened his shoulders. The familiar businessman returning, but now there was anger in his eyes. Let her in, he said firmly. The assistant hesitated. Sir, are you sure? I said. Let her in. The door slowly opened. A woman entered, tall and stiff, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her eyes cold and sharp as broken glass. She looked at Lily for a second too long, then back at Mr. Hawley. Hello, Edward, she said smoothly. After all this time, you still don't know when to stop digging into the past. Lily felt an instant chill. You know her? She whispered. Mr. Hall didn't take his eyes off the woman. More than I ever wanted to. The woman's lips curved into a thin, fake smile. Lily, isn't it? That's what they call you now. Sweet name. Much nicer than Rose. Lily's breath caught. You knew my name. Of course I did, the woman replied calmly. I was the one who changed it. The air in the room turned heavy, unbearable. Mr. Hawley stepped forward. You told me she was gone, he snapped. You made me believe my own daughter was dead. You were busy, she replied lightly. Building your empire. Signing contracts. Saving companies. You hardly had time for a child, Edward. I simply moved her somewhere. More convenient. You stole her, he roared, his voice shaking the walls. Lily flinched. The woman didn't even blink. I protected my future, she said. That orphanage was funded by my family. I controlled where the children went and what they became. That girl was valuable. Valuable for what? Lily demanded, finding her voice. The woman looked at her. Slowly, carefully. For becoming someone important one day. A heavy realization slowly settled in Mr. Hale's mind. You were afraid, he said quietly. Afraid that if the world knew about my child, she would inherit everything instead of you. Her eyes flashed for half a second, the only crack in her armor. I am your business partner, Edward. I spent years building this with you, she said through clenched teeth. And I was not going to let some child raised in nothing inherit it all. Lily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Everything I suffered. Lily said, her voice trembling. The loneliness, the hunger, the cold nights, ... was because of you. So dramatic, the woman said, waving it off. You survived, didn't you? And look at you now, standing in a billionaire's office. Mr. Hawley pointed toward the open secret room. Look at what you destroyed. he shouted. You stole years of her life. Years of mine. For the first time, Lily saw the old painting in that room clearly, a man holding a tiny baby in a blanket. On the back of the frame, in faded ink, were the words, Rose Hall, my whole heart. Tears filled her eyes. That's me, she whispered. Yes, he said, his voice soft now. You were always my whole heart. The woman realized immediately that she was losing control of the situation. Her tone changed. Listen, Edward, this doesn't have to become ugly. The press must never know about this girl. It would damage your image. Our companies. Our power. I don't care about my image anymore, he replied coldly. I care about my daughter. He turned to the assistant. Call my lawyers. And the authorities. Now. The woman's face finally broke into panic. You wouldn't dare. Oh, I would, he said. And I will. She turned toward Lily, eyes dark with threat. This isn't over. Before she could step another inch, 2 security guards appeared at the door, blocking her path. Escort her out, Mr. Hawley ordered. And make sure she never comes near this building. Or my child. Again, as they led her away, the echo of her heels faded down the corridor, like a bad memory being erased. Silence returned. Lily stood there, breathing hard, her whole life rewriting itself inside her mind. You're safe now, he said, gently. Safe. She repeated, but what happens next? Mr. Hawley looked at her with something new in his eyes. Hope. Next, he said. You stop being forgotten. You stop being the girl from the orphanage. He held out his hand. You come home. Rose. Tears slid down her cheeks. I don't know how to be a billionaire's daughter, she whispered. He smiled softly. You don't have to be anything but you. That's more than enough. Just then, Lily remembered something else. There's another girl at the orphanage, she said quietly. She has no one. She cries at night like I used to. Mr. Hale's expression softened even more. Then we go back for her too, he said. No child of mine, or any child at all, is ever being left behind again. The next morning, the sun rose softly over the large mansion. But inside, everything felt different, as if the walls themselves had remembered something they had long forgotten. And Lily stood at the tall window in a simple guest room, watching the light touch the garden flowers, still trying to understand how her life had changed overnight. Because just yesterday, she was the quiet daughter of a maid, a girl nobody noticed. And now she had found the truth about who she really was, and Mr. Hawley, her real father, stood on the other side of the door, wondering how to make up for every lost year, every lonely night, and every tear she had cried in silence. And when he finally knocked and entered, he saw her standing there, thin and unsure. And he felt a deep pain in his heart because no child should ever feel so alone in the world. So he spoke softly, telling her that she was not alone anymore, that this house was also her home, and that he had already taken steps to make sure the woman who had taken her away would never hurt anyone again. And Lily listened quietly, her mind full of questions. But instead of asking about wealth or power, she asked about the orphanage and the other children who were still there without families. And Mr. Hawley was surprised, because most people in her place would think only of themselves. But Lily only thought of the little hands that used to hold hers in the dark, the children who cried themselves to sleep, the ones who hoped every day for a miracle that never came. And she begged him to help them, and in that moment Mr. Hall understood something important, that Lily was not only his daughter, she was his second chance to become a better human being, so he agreed. And together they went back to the old orphanage building that stood like a broken memory on the edge of the city. And as they walked through the rusted gate that Lily once stood in front of as a child, her heart beat fast, but this time she was not afraid. And when the children saw her return in a clean dress and with a strong man walking beside her, they slowly came closer, unsure at first, then full of hope. And Lily knelt down, hugged them, and told them they were not forgotten and that help had finally come. And Mr. Hawley announced that the orphanage would be rebuilt, repaired, filled with food, warmth, teachers, and love. And every child there would be given a chance at a real future. And the workers and caretakers cried, because no one had ever cared like this before. And the news soon spread through the city, not about his money, but about his heart. And when reporters tried to ask Lily who she truly was, she only smiled and said she was just a girl who remembered where she came from. And back at the mansion, a new small room was prepared for another little girl Lily had once protected, a girl who slept holding a broken doll at night. And when she arrived and saw a real bed, a real window, and Lily standing with open arms, she knew her life had changed too. And for the first time in many years, Lily slept in peace, not as the girl from the orphanage, not as the maid's shadow, and not as a forgotten child, but as Rose Hawley, a daughter who was finally home, while Mr. Hawley stood outside her door, whispering a promise that he would never, ever leave her again. And in that quiet moment, the past finally let go, and a new future began. Weeks passed since Lily, now Rose, returned to the mansion, and the mansion that once felt cold and quiet was now filled with laughter, soft footsteps, and the small, nervous giggles of children who had finally been given a home. While Mr. Hawley walked through the rooms every day, making sure each child had a warm bed, a full meal, and someone to listen to their stories. And though he had all the power in the world, he realized the greatest thing he could do now was simply be there for them, present and attentive. And Rose, once a timid girl who had hidden in shadows, found herself teaching the little ones to read, showing them the garden, holding their hands when they were scared, and telling them that they were strong and worthy. And every evening, after the children slept, she and her father would sit in the large library and talk about the past, about the lies that had separated them, about the woman who had stolen her childhood, and about the children still waiting to be rescued. And in those moments, Mr. Hawley confessed that the guilt he had carried for all those years was heavy, heavier than any business loss or failed deal, and that he would spend the rest of his life making it right. While Rose listened and forgave, understanding that adults sometimes make mistakes, but courage and love can fix them. And one afternoon, news arrived that shook them again. The woman who had tried to control their lives had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few cryptic letters and unanswered questions. And though the authorities were searching, Rose and her father realized they could not wait for justice to arrive. They had to build a future regardless, so together they planned trips back to the orphanages, finding children who had no names on lists, no homes, only memories of cold nights and empty stomachs. And each child they rescued felt the same fear and hope that Rose had once carried, trembling at first, then slowly trusting. And as the mansion filled with laughter, toys, and running feet, Rose finally understood that her life's purpose was more than just finding herself. It was about giving others a chance. And one rainy evening, as the sun set in soft orange and pink, Rose looked out the large windows and saw the children playing in the garden, their coats wet, hair stuck to their faces, but smiling. And she felt a warmth in her chest she had never felt before, a sense of home, family, and belonging that no money could ever buy. And Mr. Hawley joined her by the window, placing a hand on her shoulder, and they both stood in quiet gratitude, knowing the battles of the past had led to this moment, and that though there might still be challenges ahead, the most important thing was already true. No child would ever be left behind again. And Rose realized with a smile that she was no longer the girl who hid behind shadows, the orphan who had waited for someone to return, She was the one who now carried hope, love, and courage for everyone around her. And together with her father and the children, she began to build a new world. One filled with warmth, safety, and endless possibilities. A world where the past no longer controlled the future, and where every child could dream freely. Months had passed since Rose had returned to the mansion, and the halls that once echoed with emptiness now rang with laughter, chatter, and the tiny footsteps of children who had finally found a home. Rose had grown stronger, more confident, and each day she helped teach the rescued children to read, play, and trust again. Mr. Holly had changed too. The man who had once buried his past under wealth and power now spent his days caring for the children and making sure every corner of the orphanage was safe and warm. One afternoon, Rose noticed a new letter waiting on the table, sealed and official, informing them that several abandoned children across the city had finally been registered and would soon be brought to the mansion. Excitement and nervousness filled the air as preparations began. That evening, Rose walked through the garden, looking at the children playing under the soft glow of the setting sun, their laughter carrying across the yard like music. And she realized that even though the past had been filled with pain, loss, and betrayal, it had also led her to this purpose, helping others, bringing hope, and creating a family from strangers. Mr. Holly joined her, and together they watched the sky change colors, feeling peace they had never known before. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. Rose smiled, her eyes bright with hope. "Yes," she replied. "Now, no child will ever be left behind again." In that moment, the mansion no longer felt like a building of wealth and secrets, but a home of courage, love, and second chances, a place where the past had finally healed, and the future promised light for all who had once been forgotten.